Happy Monday night, y'all, and welcome. We have another great session of the Friends in Fiction Official Book Club tonight. I'm Brenda Gardner in South Carolina, and my co-host Lisa
Hi,
is
everyone.
in Atlanta. And we are welcoming Wiley Cash to our session tonight. Welcome, Wiley.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for having me. This is a special thing I get to do to be with y'all tonight.
Oh, thanks so much. Well, we're really excited because we're going to be discussing When Ghosts Come Home, and judging from the activity on our book club page, we have lots of readers who have read it and are prepared for questioning tonight. But first of all, let me give you everyone a little background on Wiley. Wiley is the New York Times bestselling author of A Land More Kind Than Home, the acclaimed This Dark Road to Mercy, The Last Ballad, and most recently, When Ghosts Come Home. He won the SEBA Book Award and the Conroy Legacy Award, was a finalist for the Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize and the Edgar Allan Poe Award for Best Novel, and has been nominated for many more. A native of North Carolina, he is the alumni author in residence at the University of North Carolina, Asheville. He lives in Wilmington, North Carolina with his wife, photographer Mallory Cash, and their two daughters. Excuse me. Welcome, Wiley.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That's quite an intro and quite a bio.
That's quite the resume, isn't it?
Listening to that about yourself, is that weird? Is that cool? You're like, yes, I did all that.
I don't know. I think that it doesn't. I'm not numb to anything. I still feel things. I think that what it reminds me of, just how much work it's been to write these books and to go to as many schools as I've gone to for as long as I did, and then to round it out with what you said there about having two kids. It's like, oh my God, we did that too. Wow, we've done a lot of stuff. It's just a lot, and so instead of making it puff my chest out, it makes me kind of think like, how did we do all that? Because everything is, when your hobby becomes your job, it very much is your job. And I remember after my first novel came out, I had just finished the manuscript for my second. I had a 2-book deal with my first 2 books. And I sent my editor the manuscript for my second novel that was under contract. And so I didn't have a contract. I was free and clear. And I'd been on the road nonstop for almost 2 years. I'd written a second book under all this pressure. And my editor offered me another 2-book contract based on a phone conversation we had. And I remember running downstairs and telling my wife, Mallory, I said, David just offered me another 2-book contract. And she said, wow, this is amazing. Your dream is coming true. You've always wanted to write for a living. Are you sure you want to do it? Are you sure you want to do this again? So when I hear the bio, I think about, gosh, that was a lot, but here I am still doing it, still doing it virtually.
Well, we are very happy that you did and are. So,
yes.
And we have lots of readers with us tonight, and many have read the book. But for those who haven't, who are going to stay with us till we go to spoilers, could you give us a summary of When Ghosts Come Home?
Sure. So Ghosts Come Home, when Ghosts Come Home opens in the fall of 1984. And it begins when a middle-aged sheriff is awakened in the middle of the night by the sound of a low-flying aircraft passing over his house and heading for a small municipal airport right on the coast of North Carolina, just south of Wilmington, Oak Island, North Carolina, to be precise. And so the sheriff knows there's no good reason for an aircraft of this size to be coming in that low this late at night to an airport that small. And so he rides out to the airport, and what he finds there changes not only his life, but the course of the lives in this small little sleepy beach town forever. And so our sheriff, whose name is Winston Barnes, is the main character. He's facing a pretty tough re-election battle. The election's coming up in several days. And he knows he's probably not going to win. And he's worried about that because the guy running against him is a real dirtbag. He's also worried because his wife is suffering from cancer and she is on his insurance, and he's afraid of not having insurance anymore. And what complicates everything, two characters complicate everything for him. One is his 25-year-old daughter, Colleen, who returns home kind of out of nowhere, nursing her own private griefs. And a young black child, a black boy, he's 14 years old, from Atlanta, who is sent up to the country because he got in some trouble down in Atlanta. He's sent to live with his older sister and her new husband and their new baby. And so these two characters really complicate things for Winston, emotionally, tactically, psychologically, practically, culturally. And so he's got his hands full. And so it's a mystery, but it's also a study of fathers and daughters, and even fathers and sons, as you'll see if you read the book. And but it's a novel that I wrote. I'd written quite a bit of it, but I really knuckled down on it and finished it during COVID. And so I think the novel very much feels how many of us felt during COVID, which is very insulated, maybe kind of claustrophobic, kind of on unsteady emotional ground, but also with hearts that are open to encountering good people and hoping for good things to happen.
Oh, that was such an awesome way to put it. And I'm so glad that you touched on that, because I don't know, as I was reading it, there's just so much there. There's like the mystery, and there's drama, and there's the racial tension, and the questions of home and place and family, and it's kind of all balled up in there. And there's just this sort of ongoing drumbeat of tension throughout the book. So I was going to ask you what you consider the novel, if you considered a mystery with all of that going on, and so you answered that already.
Well, that's a great. Let me answer it again in maybe a better, more truthful way, Brenda. You know, I've been called a crime writer. I've been called a mystery writer, and that's great because crime writers and mystery writers sell a lot of books. But crime writers and mystery writers, real crime writers and mystery writers, are much more nimble, intelligent, writers than I am. So this is a mystery novel because it was a mystery to me for much of the time that I was writing it. I had Winston, who I really cared about. Colleen shows up and kind of troubles and complicates his life. And whenever I'm writing, I knew this airplane was going to happen. I knew this airplane was going to land. I knew it was going to be abandoned. I knew it was going to be empty. I knew all of this. But I was really interested in the characters, how they got along, how they didn't get along, what they needed from one another. And then when Jay came along as a character, the kid from Atlanta, it just really deepened the novel for me. But for many months, maybe a year, maybe longer, I had no idea who flew that aircraft. I had no idea what was in it. I had no idea what would happen at the end of the book. And my editor would say, these characters are so interesting. I feel them so deeply. What's the plot? And I would say, I don't know. I'm still kind of waiting to see what is going to come of these complicated people who are all hurting and all need various things. Even Bradley Fry needs something,
Exactly.
It took me a while to get there.
He needs a lot.
Well, it's funny.
Prayer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he needs prayer.
And I'll tell you, that leads us right into a message that we have from someone for you that I'm going to play for you right now.
Okay.
And our readers.
Good evening, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here, even in recorded video. Lisa and Brenda, thank you so much for having me on tonight. And Wiley, welcome to the Friends in Fiction official book club. I hope you're all having a great time this evening. Wiley, congratulations on all of your success. Each book seems to get better and better. And one of the reasons for that is your development of character. Your characters are so beautifully developed, and really it takes the readers down an intensive deep dive into who these people really are. So my question for you really is, how do you develop character? What's your process for this? I mean, people like Jess and Adelaide, or Easter and Ruby, or Ella Mae Wiggins, and now Winston Barnes. These are people that we just can't get enough of as readers. So where does all that come from? And do they get under your skin the same way they get under ours as readers? Thanks, and have a great time tonight, everybody.
Oh, that's a nice message. What a sweet man that Ron Block is. He, I think my first virtual event happened with my first novel. He was down in Florida, and he had a TV show with like a local news affiliate, and we did we had just moved back to North Carolina, and we did a Facebook Live event. We were living at my in-laws' house from their kitchen. And I had no idea what Facebook Live was. I didn't know if anybody could see me. I could just hear Ron talking to me, and I did my best. And he has not given up on me. That's great. But to his question about the characters, you know, how do you do it? How does anybody do it? What I think about is, I think how, you know, all creation is autobiography in some way or another. So everything that my characters feel, regret, grief, pain, jealousy, envy, rage, those are all things that I felt at varying degrees at one time or another in my life. So nothing that I'm creating aside from their names is really made up, right? None of it's made up. We've all felt all of those things. And so really creating character is just the act of remembering how those things feel, right? And then there are the writerly tricks of, well, how do I take that abstract emotion and make it feel tactile for the reader? You know, how do I bring it home to the reader? Well, you do it with physical things like Winston's watch, for example. Winston's watch ends up coming back. The Magic House, when Colleen's mother is talking to her about this bedtime story that she used to tell her about the Magic House. And so the watch means love, the watch means devotion, the watch means marriage, the Magic House means time, the Magic House means childhood, the Magic House means parental love and devotion. And so it's easier to talk about those abstract character things if I can give you a physical thing through which to communicate that stuff. But what I really do is as I trouble my characters, I ask myself, you know, what do they want? What's in the way of what they want? That's where the plot's going to come from. You know, what does Winston want? Well, he wants to feel valued. He wants to feel important. He wants to feel helpful. What's in the way of that? Well, this investigation. Bradley Fry's in the way of that. What does Colleen want? Colleen wants to feel like something, maybe a mother, maybe an attorney, maybe a wife. And when the novel opens, she doesn't really feel like any of those things because all this stuff's in the way. What does Jay want? Jay wants independence. Jay wants the world to make sense. Jay wants there to not be vicious racism that he hasn't invited, right? Aside from just existing. So all of these characters want stuff. And as a writer, you just get in there and you just dig around in all that pain and all that desire, and it just makes them feel more real. And to Ron's question, do they stay with me? Absolutely. Yeah, they do. And, you know, you still think about them when you're writing another book, or, you know, you think, are they going to come back? Am I going to go back to any of these stories? So yeah, absolutely. You're still muted, Brenda.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that. We were kind of wondering about that very question because there's so many stories and so many, you know, questions that many of our readers said, is there going to be a sequel?
Not that I'm planning right now. I kind of said all I wanted to say about the Barnes family, you know, but I do think, you know, I'm working on another novel that's set in Brunswick County, on the Cape Fear River. And it's set in 2018, and I thought, God, it would be kind of neat if Colleen makes an appearance in this book. That would be kind of cool. Or if some story from When Ghosts Come Home finds its way in, and you know, I have my own little Yoknebatoff County like Faulkner did. My sentences
Oh,
are just
yeah.
much shorter.
Oh, well, I think that I'm hearing I'm having some technical difficulty, so I'm gonna ask you another question and then mute myself.
Okay.
Is it good enough to go on, Lisa?
Mhm.
Okay. Wiley, you mentioned something in the acknowledgments that we just really loved, and I'm going to just read it real quick and let you talk about it. You said, during the years I worked on this book, we called it the mysterious airplane because that was how Early and Juniper referred to it. Eventually, they began asking me who flew the airplane, and I did not yet have an answer, so they decided for me. A ghost flew it. That simple supposition changed the course of this novel in profound ways. Could you elaborate on that a little bit and their involvement?
Yeah, they were
What's
always asking me, you know, we called it the airplane book. Then they called it the mysterious airplane, and they were young. I guess they were 5 and 4, 6 and 5. They're now 7 and 6 when I was writing it. So they were little, you know, they were not yet in kindergarten. Our oldest wasn't when I was really working on it. And she kept asking me, who's flying the airplane? And I said, I don't know. I don't know. And she said, well, how do you not know, my oldest? How do you not know? And I said, well, you know, writing is mysterious and stories are mysterious. And sometimes they don't reveal themselves until we're ready to see them. And then when they said maybe a ghost is flying the airplane, it made me think about how ghosts are like that as well. You know, ghosts of people who have passed on, whether they be children who have left our lives too early, parents who have, you know, left our lives maybe too early or too late, depending on how you feel about your parents. But, you know, these people are never really gone. I was talking to Margaret Wrinkle, who's a New York Times opinion writer, wrote these wonderful books, Late Migrations, Graceful and at Last, about how often our parents, her mother, my father, appear in our dreams. And these ghosts appear in our dreams. And every time my dad appears in a dream, he doesn't seem to know that he's passed on. And I'm thankful that he hasn't. I think, oh God, that wasn't true, you know. And I can only imagine the pain that I would feel if I felt that way about one of my children, you know. And so when they said maybe a ghost is flying the plane, I thought, oh my gosh, you know, all these characters are haunted by ghosts in one way or another. And so that title just began to kind of fix itself thematically on the book.
And oh, that's just powerful. And I will say this novel seems to have a stronger focus on, well, fatherhood, but also parenthood. Mm-hmm. Was that an intentional thing as you began writing the book?
I don't think it was intentional, but this is the first novel that I had written since having children. You know, I began The Last Ballad before our kids were born. That's my third novel. So this is the first novel I began after having children. It's the first novel that I began after losing my father. It's the first novel that I began after we moved down here to the coast of North Carolina, which I never thought I would write about. I never thought I would write about Eastern North Carolina or Southeastern North Carolina. I always thought I'd write about Gastonia west to Asheville, that area up in the mountains, because that was the area that I knew best. But, you know, my children were born here in Wilmington, and my wife was raised here, and we've come back here. And they know this place. They are of this place, and this place is of them in a way that it'll never be for me. You know, I will never know this place in the way my children will, or in the way Mallory will. And so I think writing this book was a way to try to make up for that in some way. You know, when I write about a place, I really try to get to know it on every imaginable level, whether it's historically, culturally, geographically, environmentally. And I really threw myself into this region to write this book. And I did it because I'm playing catch up with two little girls who look out at the trees and they say, oh, you know, there's a house finch. There's this any number of birds that we didn't have where I grew up in Western North Carolina. They know the trees just automatically because they're interested in that kind of thing, the way that I have to look up their names, you know. And so, you know, being a father and writing about a father, you know, a couple of fathers in the novel, all of that was influenced by being a father myself. But the very act of writing the book itself was the biggest connection to my daughters.
Oh, that's awesome.
I know. I love that this was the first book that you wrote after becoming a father. Like that, that means so much. That's really cool.
There are so many ties. Oh, go ahead, Wiley. I'm sorry.
Well, you know, there's this scene when the novel opens where Winston is having the dream about his own father, and he's dreaming that he is his father. And those were dreams that I had. You know, we all cared for my dad in his closing days, and he was set up in a hospital bed in the bedroom, and he had really distinct hands, and my hands looked like his. And I would sit with him at night, and I would get up with him to use the restroom and then tuck him back in. And I would have dreams after he passed that I was looking at his hands while he was sleeping in his hospital bed, but I was actually looking at my own hands because I was in that hospital bed. It wasn't his hands I was seeing, it was mine. And that was such like almost like a transmogrification of leaving this world and like teetering on the edge of that next one, right? And it made me think how sad I was sitting there essentially waiting for my father to pass away. And then of course I have these two babies, and I'm thinking, oh my God, just by virtue of me being their father, I'm leaving them a legacy of pain, you know, like I hope they love me enough to grieve my loss one day, but my God, I've cursed them to that grieving, right? I've by having a hand in their creation, I've cursed them. And I heard someone say recently that the price of love is grief, and that's what I've done to them. And that was that's a heavy burden, and that's one of the emotions that was really kind of pushing down on me when I was writing the book.
Absolutely. That quote I've heard as well, and it really resonates with me too, because there has to be some, you know, kind of reconciliation of those grief feelings with, you know, why. But I didn't really intend to get off on that tangent, but that was a really powerful answer. I would like to, I know we have some readers who may have questions. Please put it in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that, so you can ask Wiley things that pique your interest about the book. But racism plays a large role in this book, and it's very riveting. So I was curious about your portrayal of the African-American characters, because it really rings true. How did you approach writing those characters?
Oh gosh, that's a good question, and it's a tough question to answer. When you're writing outside, well, let me say this first of all. In this novel, I'm writing outside of my experience culturally, ethnically, gender, all that stuff. And I'm drawn to doing that because my life is pretty boring. And the lives of people like myself are pretty boring. And I'll tell you why it's boring. I'm a 44-year-old middle-class white guy with a PhD. I face very few obstacles in my life, right? I rarely, if ever, step into a social situation and ask myself, how am I going to work this? Where's the levers of power? What kind of prejudices have already been cast upon me before I even open my mouth? I never deal with that. So as a writer, I don't really want to write about people like myself, because when you're writing, you're looking for tension, because tension is where story comes from. I don't have tension in my life, so my stories are like funny stories about my kids, right? That's funny, like in a pithy Facebook story, but you don't want to read a 300-page novel about my kids like pooping in the bathtub, right? Or maybe you do. They do. They'd love that. I hope they're not watching this. They would be so embarrassed if they were watching this right now.
Hi guys.
But I can see my wife being like, go ahead and finish eating. He'll be home later. You can tell him how embarrassed you are. But to write about a character like Jay, who's this 14-year-old young Black man from Atlanta, or Ed Bellamy, who's the father of Jay's brother-in-law, who's, you know, is victimized in this novel. I don't know. I just think over the past several years, I just felt compelled to write about people who are spurred on by righteous anger, instead of what we see very often is the expectation of measured response to things like racial terrorism, racial violence, racism by and large. And I wanted them to have scenes. I wanted Ed Bellamy to have a scene where he says, I'm tired of this. I'm not going to do this anymore, right? And then we find out later in the novel exactly how tired of it he is. And then I wanted Jay, you know, Jay's 14 years old and he's out in the country in rural Eastern North Carolina. He's from Atlanta. And he's encountering things and confronting issues and challenges that he's never had to confront before. And he's angry, for lack of a better word. He's more than angry. He's enraged. You know, he got in some trouble in Atlanta that wasn't really of his doing. And he disappointed his parents. His father says, we are deeply ashamed of you. And that's a terrifying and heart-rending thing for a kid to hear. And, you know, I grew up in the 1980s in Gastonia, and I remember dads, Black dads, like Jay's father, who were hard on their kids and always scared me a little bit because, especially their sons, you know, stand up. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Stop that. Slow down. You know, pull your pants up, you know, spit your gum out. And my parents didn't ever say that stuff to me. And I wasn't yes, ma'am, and yes, sir. And I didn't always have my pants pulled up, right? But nobody ever said things like that to me. And I realized as an adult looking back, it's not that those dads were mean, it's that those dads had been in Vietnam. Those dads had suffered under Jim Crow laws. Those dads had not been able to swim in public pools. And my dad's experience had been very different, you know? And so I didn't grow up with the pressures that someone like Jay does. And Jay has that like diamond level of pressure at one point in the novel. And he reacts out of anger because he doesn't know what else to do. And so that just really interested me in terms of trying to get these characters on the page. And again, these are emotions that we've all felt. Jay just feels them for different reasons than I did when I was 14. Ed Bellamy just feels them for different reasons than I will when I'm 65 or however old Ed is. I can't quite remember. So that's a little bit about them.
Yeah.
Well, for me, as a woman of color myself, when I was reading it, I thought, how did he get it so right? There were so many. I mean, I'm not a young man. My experience is different, but racism is racism. I've dealt with it in my past. I've had issues, you know, things happened to me before. And you really nailed it to the point where I think it will have our readers, hopefully our readers will remember these things, and it will start conversations that people can talk about racism and, you know, social justice, things like that unfortunately we're still dealing with today.
Sure.
You know, a lot of the things from that time period in the 80s are resurfacing now, which is unfortunate. But that part really was one of the things that I thought, wow, he did such a great job. So thank you for that.
Well,
for shining a real light on it and not glossing over it.
Sure. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, and I hope that I got the Atlanta vibe as right as I could.
Yes. Oh gosh, there were so many things that you said. Banana Red, MD 2020.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
one thing I was like, whoa, yep, I remember that.
Oh yeah, I remember
Um,
that too. But yeah, I
there were
mean, there's
so many
so much
actually.
coded language. I grew up in the
Yeah.
1980s, and there was coded language around like Willie Horton and welfare queens, and we know what that means, right? We know when you really get around and you look at that language, who that's referring to, right? And we see that language coming back right now with what happened in Buffalo with replacement theory, right? And we can say, well, we didn't mean that when we said it on the news. Well, that kid heard that, he meant that, right? And so, there's a scene in the novel that I wrote toward emotionally when Ed Bellamy goes into Winston's office. Ed Bellamy is a kind of a Black leader in the community. He teaches at the high school. He's a Vietnam War veteran. He was a sniper. And there are people doing night rides in his community, which means they're driving around with Confederate flags, they're shining spotlights in windows, they're shooting off guns, they're doing all this stuff. And Ed Bellamy's been calling all day trying to get Winston on the phone. And the secretary, her name's Vicky, Winston's known her for 15 years, doesn't give him Ed Bellamy's messages. And so Ed Bellamy barrels into Winston's office and says, hey man, what's going on? Like, I'm trying to get you on the phone all day, and you don't even care enough about this. Like, this can't stand. And Winston goes out to his secretary and he says, why didn't you give me Ed Bellamy's messages? And she says, because there's no law against driving around, right? And so she is choosing to see these night rides, which are specifically geared toward initiating terror in the Black community. She is able to call that driving around. Whereas Ed Bellamy, who is a victim of those things, knows very well what it is, right? And so I'm interested in language. I'm interested in how language is used, adopted, co-opted, extended, amended, how we can hear something like the Great Replacement or replacement theory, and then have that guy did what he did in Buffalo. I'm interested in stuff like that, and I think it's important that we talk about those things. And I don't think my novels tell you how to feel about it, but I hope they show you what it feels like. That's what I'm really trying to do in my books, is show readers what something feels like.
Definitely. I do have a couple of questions in the chat. It's going a little, you're getting lots of hearts and lots of comments.
Oh, that's nice.
But do have a comment and question from Bubba Wilson. She said that she loved all the 80s references and she wanted to know if you actually owned a Walkman or a red Camaro T-top. And she also wanted to thank you for mentioning Shadows of the Night by Pat Benatar.
Oh yeah, Running with the Shadows of the Night. What was the first? If I had a
Walkman or a red Camaro T-top.
I had a Walkman in the 80s. I had a Discman in the 90s.
I had a Discman too.
Yeah. And I did not have a T-top Camaro, but I wanted one desperately.
I'll bet.
Yeah, I wanted one. I mean, I'm from Gastonia. Come on. A Camaro is like the height of cool, right? You wash it in the driveway after class every day. Writing about the 80s was really fun. I was born in 77. So the 80s, the mid 80s, 84, the election that Winston is sitting in was the election between Reagan and Mondale for Reagan's second term. That was the first election I remember as a young person. And so that's really my first cultural, historical experience. 6, 7 years old. I can remember Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA. I remember when that album came out. I remember Michael Jackson's Thriller when that came out. I remember Pat Benatar. I remember, beanbag chairs, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. I remember all of these things. But I also remember seeing posters of people like David Cassidy in my sister's friends' bedrooms, who were, my sister's 8 years older than me. I had no clue who David Cassidy was or why this guy with weird hairs on their bedroom wall. But in the mid 1980s, they were still holding on to things they had experienced in the 70s, right? And that's certainly what Colleen's experience was. And so it was a lot of fun. And, you know, I always tell people when I teach writing that if you can nail the reader down in an era, then you've done a lot of work. You've done a lot of work of the novel. You've given your characters a stage on which to act, and you've given them objects with which to interact: rotary phones, Walkmans, Bubblicious bubblegum, Camaros, beanbag chairs. You know, I'm using objects for them to use, which brings beats to the scene, to the dialogue, the conversation, and it also nails you down in the era, and it makes it feel more grounded in a physical space. And so that was really fun for me. You know, when I was writing this book, a handful of years ago, I put on Facebook on my author page, you know, are you a child of the 70s? What did your bedroom look like? You know, if you're a female, what does your bedroom look like? And the way the bedroom is described is essentially the bedroom that a North Carolina writer named Jill McCorkle described. It's essentially her childhood bedroom that I tore from her diary. That's what her bedroom looked like. So
Nice. I did. I enjoyed the 80s references as well. I was like, oh yeah, there's quite a few things that I remembered. I do have another question. We have a special question from our friend Hyphen at Foxtail Bookshop in Atlanta, who's a Wiley Cash fan. She wants to know, what music did you listen to when you wrote When Ghosts Come Home?
Gosh, I don't listen to a lot of music when I write. I don't really listen to anything, to be honest. If anything, I'll turn a fan on or listen to white noise. We rent an office in Wilmington. This is the office that we rent. And so we've got I've got a fan tucked under the desk here that I'll run to drown out other people who have real jobs and have phone conversations around me in other offices. But I listened to a lot of 80s stuff, like when I would go jog at night in the neighborhood or go walk around. I listened to REM's album Fables of the Reconstruction a lot, just to kind of get that 80s feel. Like, what did the 80s feel like, right? I listened to a lot of Bruce Springsteen, of course, Pat Benatar, Michael Jackson, just to kind of put myself back in. Because I remember it, but I didn't know necessarily how it felt, right? To be of age, to be in your 20s, perhaps, as a young person in the 1980s. So I listened to a lot of the music that people of that age, college kids, were listening. College, you know, alternative rock, especially in the mid 1980s.
Music can be such a powerful tool for memory too, because it just takes you right back there.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
Jill says a funny comment. She says, big hair in the 80s, big mismatched earrings too.
Oh yeah, Swatch watches, wearing like 3 watches on your arm, mismatched Converse All-Stars, all that stuff. Jams. Yeah.
And fellow author Kimberly Brock is watching, and she said she got her finger caught in an 8-track player when she was a kid.
Oh, that's so funny. Kimberly's got a new book out.
Yes. And it's our September book club pick.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. It is. And I just bought it this weekend.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we just saw her this weekend. So hi, Kimberly. Okay. One other question that we've actually had a couple of people ask: were there any real life characters in this book?
Were there any real life characters? No, I mean, aside from the basketball players that are mentioned, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, you know, Walter Mondale, Ronald Reagan. No, none of these characters were real.
Based on real. They weren't based
They
on.
weren't, no, there was no sheriff with a heart of gold, Winston Barnes. There's no daddy's boy, wannabe sheriff, Bradley Fry. But you know, everything you write, everything that I write is an amalgam of my memory, my experience, that kind of stuff. So these people exist somewhere, but just different parts of Winston Barnes exist and other people.
Very cool. Brenda, do you have a couple of questions, or do you want me to pull another one from the chat?
Yeah, if I'll go ahead and ask one, and
Okay.
this is kind of I don't know, kind of a culmination, but Anissa Armstrong wants to know, was your ending of the book always the ending, or did you find it as you were going along? Because it was really, I'll interject my comments into Anissa's. It really was a
I know.
stunning ending. It was like,
Yeah.
that's the other time I thought I was going to have to pull over in Atlanta, was when I got to the end.
That's a great question, Anissa. No, I didn't know what the ending was going to be. And I didn't really know what role the characters were going to play at the end, who was going to reveal themselves to be whom or what, to be honest with you. And there was a point in June, the novel came out in September. Let me think for a second. The novel came out in September of 21. So I was turning the manuscript in the summer of June 2020. And I was down in Beaufort, South Carolina, doing an event with Pat Conroy Literary Center. And I was working on the ending, and I was in a hotel, and I would email my editor an ending. And then I would immediately text him, because I knew he would see the text before he'd open the email, and I would ask him not to read it because I had decided to change it, right? And so that happened quite a bit. And then once I arrived at the ending that's in the book now, I knew it was right, because I didn't want it to end that way. And I knew it was right because it ended that way. And the way, the emotional heft of the novel at the end, I always knew I was writing toward that. I just didn't know how I was going to get there. And that's what writing is, really. You know, some of y'all might be good at math. I'm not particularly good at math. Both of my kids show a great aptitude for math, which is a blessing if you ask me. Maybe they won't be writers. But writing is essentially math, and it's an equation, right? And so let's say that the emotional tone the book ends on is a 9, right? Well, I spend the whole book trying to figure out what numbers and values I have to plug in to get to that 9. And it took a lot of endings and a lot of dynamics there in the last 20 or so pages to really feel like I had arrived at that 9. And I also wanted the ending to leave the reader's ears ringing. I didn't want to stretch it out. I didn't want to unpack it. I didn't want to say, dear reader, if you had only paid more attention, you would have noticed that on page 29, I left this little breadcrumb. I wanted I wanted the ending to be, I want it to be emblematic of how we feel when we get bad news, right? When we get a bad diagnosis, when we get broken up with, when we get fired. We're, you know, the sound periscopes out, we become hyper aware of our surroundings, and we think, how could this be happening? And nobody comes in and explains that to you. You just go on, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I wanted the book to feel at the end.
Well, you again hit the nail on the head. Everyone in the chat is that ending, mind blown, that ending.
Mind blowing.
Didn't see it. Brenda, we talked about this before we were live. So Brenda, you shared that when you were driving this weekend to Atlanta, you almost, well, maybe you should share how you almost pulled over when you.
There were 2 times when I feared I was going to have to pull over off the interstate because I was just so. And one was the scene where Sheriff Barnes and Bradley Fry are sort of having to stand off with the guns over Jay, who was, you know, in the backyard, but Bradley was demanding that he be handed over, and I was just like not breathing. While that was going on, and I'm like, and I don't listen to a lot of audiobooks for this reason, but then the second time was the very end when it all came spilling forth, and now that makes total sense because that's the exact feeling I
Yes.
got. I'm like, I got to do something. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted it to feel, one of my favorite stories is a story called The Open Boat by a realist writer named Stephen Crane. And there's a line in The Open Boat where it's a novella, maybe a long short story. It's these people who are in a dinghy. A boat has sunk, and it's a cook and a machinist and a reporter, and they're in a dinghy on a boat out in the open ocean trying to get to land. And it's narrated from the perspective of the reporter, third person, I believe. And it said, there's one part where he's just so defeated and he's so angry that it looks like his life is going to end this way with these two people he doesn't know, and he's wet and he's cold, and and it says he wanted to throw stones at the temple, but there were no stones, and there were no temples to throw the stones at. It's just the hand you've been dealt. And that's how I wanted the end of the book to feel.
Wow, it was something. Did
It
you
was.
always employ the technique with, and I'm not sure how to phrase this, but where you say, Colleen didn't know for months that,
Yeah. No, I think in previous novels I'd never employed that. I did a little bit in the last ballad. There's a line that sticks out to me where it says, Ella had never seen the ocean and she would not live to see it. Little lines like that I did, but I really enjoy doing that in fiction because you can do it, right? The narrator is not the character. The narrator knows things the characters do not know. And so you can move ahead like that. And I wanted the reader to know that Colleen's okay. Colleen ends up being as fine as she can be, given the circumstances of her life, and life goes on. And I wanted the reader to understand that this ends up being Colleen's story. This is a novel about Colleen. This is a novel about how you act and how you live as the daughter of someone like Winston Barnes, how you live as the daughter of someone like Marie Barnes, how you live as a woman who got pregnant and had a baby instead of sitting for the bar exam, how you live as a woman who lost that baby, and how life goes on, and how you live as a woman who saw things about the situation in the investigation that her father did not. And I wanted the reader to understand in that final page, oh my God, I thought Winston was the main character, but he hasn't been at all.
Wow. There's just so much to unpack there. I can't believe it's already 7:48.
I know. I was just looking at that. Flown by.
Well, I would like to ask, because there is so much to unpack, what is one key takeaway that you want the reader to have from this book?
Gosh, one key takeaway that I want the reader to have for this book.
Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Yeah, I think all of my books, in one way or another, embrace the state motto of North Carolina. All my books are set in North Carolina. I think North Carolina is a great state to be from if you're a writer. It's a state where every 4 years we don't know who we're going to vote for. Every basketball season we root for the same team to beat the same team. We don't know what kind of barbecue we like. We don't know if the mountains or the beach are best. We've got all this tension in the state, and it's great. As I said earlier, tension's where stories come from. So it's a great place to be from if you're a writer. And the state motto here is to be rather than to seem. And I think about that state motto every time I'm writing, about how often we go for what seems rather than what is. Oftentimes we go to the ballot box with what seems and never investigate what actually is. We say what seems and we rarely say what we mean or what we believe. And so I'm really interested in how characters respond to someone like Bradley Fry, who seems like the answer. But Bradley Fry is an unabashed racist daddy's boy who's never really worked a job in his life, who's got money to win an election. And so I'm just really interested in stuff like that. Winston seems like a beaten down old man whose time has passed by, but he's actually up to something. He's got a lot on his plate and he's doing pretty well. It seems like Ed Bellamy's son is involved in the appearance of this airplane. And then we learn later that might not be the case. And so I'm really interested in that seeming and being as preferable over seeming.
I love that.
Oh, me too. Well, since you mentioned that and such an inspiration from North Carolina, are there any particular writers that have inspired you greatly?
Oh my gosh. North Carolina, we're so lucky in this state to have as many writers as we do. I mean, just over the past couple of weeks, I've seen Clyde Edgerton, Nina DeGramont, who wrote The Christie Affair. I've seen Kevin Maurer, who wrote No Easy Day. He's got a new book out called Damn Lucky. I saw Jason Mott, who just won the National Book Award. John Jeremiah Sullivan, who wrote an essay collection called Pulphead. These are people that I see in Wilmington all the time. I was just with Denise Kiernan, who wrote The Last Castle and The Girls of Atomic City a couple of weeks ago in Asheville. This place is just crawling with writers. Once you're in this community of writers, it's like this club that you can't get out of if you wanted to. But they're also kind and just so welcoming and so encouraging. Like when Jason won the National Book Award, my wife and we had our computer open. We were sitting on the bed, just fingers, toes, arms, legs, everything crossed. And when they said Jason's name, I swear it felt like she and I had won the National Book Award. We were just so excited for him. And so it's just a great place to be from if you're a writer. I feel endlessly lucky.
Oh, that's wonderful. And we're going to put you a little bit on the spot now and ask you, what are you reading?
What am I reading? Speaking of North Carolina writers, I am rereading Cold Mountain by Charles Frazier, who again is just like other North Carolina writers, just a gem of a human being. And I'm rereading Cold Mountain because I'm about to write about it. He won the National Book Award in 1997, and then Jason won it in 2022. And so 25 years apart, these two great American writers from North Carolina won the National Book Award, and I'm working on a piece about those two books.
Very cool. That almost kind of leads into the next question I think Brenda was going to ask.
Well, which is what would you like to talk about? Anything else you're currently working on?
I would, if y'all will indulge me for a second. I appreciate this opportunity.
I would be happy to.
Please.
Yeah. One thing that I'm really interested in is connecting with other creative people. And I have set up an online creative community that will launch June 1st. It's called This Is Working. And This Is Working is for those folks out there who are writers or visual artists or marketers or designers or any other kind of creativity, or even readers, people who just enjoy art. For those people who think they don't have the time to do it, they don't have the inspiration, that none of that stuff is out there. And so This Is Working, I've designed it to really inspire creativity, to give a boost to your creativity. And there are two options. The first option is called the Creator's Notebook. It's a monthly essay that I write about creativity, about my own process and how I'm kind of engaging with the world. And it will close out with an exercise based on the essay to get you out there engaging with the world around you, the world inside you, and kind of generating that creativity that you think you don't have time for. But I called it This Is Working because when you're a creative person, you're always working. If you're ironing clothes, you're thinking about your work. If you're watching a film, you're thinking about what you can steal for your own work. If you're engaging with advertisements, your mind is working. So we're always doing the work. So that's the first option. The second option is called Living in the Work. You get the Creator's Notebook every month and the exercise every month. But you also get access to a creators conversation where I interview creatives from around the country, famous comedians, actors, musicians, writers, painters, and ask them about their process, what keeps them at their work, what inspires them, and how they engage with the world. And you also get membership in my book club, Open Canon. We'll have a virtual book club discussion at the end of every month. led by me.
Oh, nice.
And you also get discounts and free shipping from a bookstore right here in Wilmington, North Carolina for all the book club selection. So folks can find out more at wileycash.com. That's a long plug, but it launches June 1st. You can register June 1st. And I'm thrilled. This is giving me an opportunity to do what I like doing best, which is talking about the mystery of creativity. Where does it come from? What do we do with it? How do we foster it? How do we not turn away from it? And that's where projects die, is where we turn away from the creativity that we're generating and have the opportunity to engage with every single day. So hopefully this is working. We'll give people an opportunity to do that.
That is
that's
awesome.
just amazing projects.
So I know you said wileycash.com. Where else can people keep up with you? And then also, I know our readers would like to know where they can get a signed copy of your books or book plates.
Yeah, they can keep up with me at Facebook. It's just Wiley Cash as my author page. You can always email me through my website, wileycash.com. Go to contact right there and you can get a hold of me. And if you would like signed copies, you can get copies from Pomegranate Books here in Wilmington, North Carolina. Pomegranate, Pomegranate Books, Pomegranate Books. They're in my neighborhood. You can also get books from Ghost Hill Press. These are both independent bookstores right here in my neighborhood in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Awesome. Gosh, this has been an amazing night. Our chat is still exploding with comments. There's so much love for you. We're just so thankful.
Oh my
that you took
gosh.
the time to chat about this fabulous.
The feeling is more than mutual. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Wiley, for joining us tonight. And we have just had a wonderful time. If you get a chance to go back on our page and look through some of the comments, I think you'll find our readers are pretty amazing people. So we want to say again how much we appreciate your coming and talking with us tonight.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. And we wanted to say thank you to our readers. We hit 12,000 members this morning. Yay. So thank you guys.
All right. Thanks so much, Wiley. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Oh, that was amazing.
He was just awesome. What a great guest.
I know. And so much. The things that amazes me so much about this book is the depth of the characters and how well they're interwoven. And it's just a really thoughtful book. You do a lot of thinking.
I feel like that hour flew by in like not even 20 minutes.
No time.
We need part 2, part 3, part 4.
And you know what? The other funny thing is, I felt like I should have had a sheet of paper here to write down some of the things he said.
You know, there's so many things. And then, well, he shared a really great audiobook story right before we went on live. We didn't get the chance to ask that about the narrator. So maybe in the future, when his next book comes out, we can circle back.
Right, and ask him about that.
Yeah,
I tell you, that was a powerful book, and that was my first Wiley Cash book, and it will not be my last. I definitely want to circle back and read the others.
For sure.
Especially now, kind of getting that additional insight.
Yeah.
Into, what makes him.
He's a great storyteller.
Yeah.
Like he could narrate his own book. Well, the narrator, I will say, the narrator for When Ghosts Go Home did a really great job. But just in general, Wiley, he's such a great storyteller. I feel like he could narrate books too. We have a little bit of the after show going on right now. So thanks for hanging out with us. But we still have quite a few people hanging out with us.
And that's great. And we didn't mention any of our announcements while Wiley was on, but For those who are still with us, we do have our next book club for June coming up on June 20th with the inimitable Mary Kay Andrews and the
Who we saw
Homewreckers, which I'm
yesterday.
going to just point at. That Lisa's holding up.
My
She has
light
been
is
on
making it weird.
yeah, it's a neat cover. She's been on a whirlwind tour with this book. I
Yeah.
don't know how she's made it, but she's coming up in June. And do you mind if do you want to mention the upcoming other sessions?
Sure. And then I will, but we actually have a question for you in the chat. Julie would like to
Okay.
know, Brenda, what's your preference, print copy or audio?
Oh, print copy is my preference.
Yeah.
But I have just actually started the whole audiobook thing, and I must say it is growing on me, but I'm still going to go with the print. Thanks, Julie.
Hi, Lisette. She says, if you two keep talking, we'll stick around. Oh boy, we can talk a lot, so we don't want to take over your
I don't know.
homework.
That's
We
kind
did
of
wanna
dangerous,
share-
Lisette.
We wanted to share a little bit. We got to spend the weekend together at 2 great book events. On Saturday, we got to go to Kimberly Brock's signing, and Kimberly she was on. I don't know if she's still here. But she was on for our September book club pick of the
Lost Book of Eleanor Dare.
Dare. I keep saying the last.
tricky
I'm like
one.
the lost. Yeah. I just keep calling it Eleanor Dare. I'm like, Eleanor Dare. But I realized there's like a full title. So, and that book is getting amazing reviews. Everyone on my timeline or Goodreads, it's like 5 stars, 5 stars. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to read it. And you just bought
and
your
the
copy.
cover. I know. I just realized I had left my copy in the car, so I couldn't hold it up. But it has got a stunning cover and just a really interesting story from the Lost Colony. So that was really cool. And then we got to see Adriana Trigiani and Mary Kay Andrews in kind of theater format on Sunday, which was really interesting. It was just the two of them alone on a stage, sitting in 2 chairs, talking, and that was pretty cool too.
It was, I think, dare I pick a favorite? But I feel like that might have been my favorite book event I have attended in a really long time. Because the conversation, first, it's 2 powerhouse female writers that have been around. They're so successful. They have strong voices. They're both amazing. And then you put them together in conversation where they share these intimate stories. It just felt like they were just talking directly to us. I mean, it didn't feel like we were in a big theater. I felt like we were in their living room. And
exactly.
Yeah, it was intimate, and it was really great. It wasn't just your normal signing, or, a lot of the events we get to go to are really neat with drinks and food, but it just felt different. It felt different. And it was amazing.
It definitely had that different vibe. And I will say, you mentioned it earlier, we were talking about the plot in Wiley's book. I really did have to get Lisa to listen to it again with me, because I was like so unsatisfied being in the car with that finish and not being able to go.
Yeah, we sat in the hotel. We listened to probably about the last, maybe 45 minutes of the book. We listened to it together in our hotel room on Saturday night, and we're both sitting there just listening, like, here it comes.
I know. I mean, it was
great.
something. I had to have that. I had to have that shared experience to hear it again.
Yeah. That made it. It was amazing. Like I see Ron speak so highly. Ron Block, you guys, really wanted to be here tonight to pop in, but he had another obligation, and he sent the video, and we're so thankful. So thank you, Ron, if you watched us. We're sending that great question, but he always speaks so highly of Wiley Cash and his writing. And I see why, you know.
I totally do. And I also wish we had had more time to talk to him about his teaching at UNC Asheville. And although he did allude to that, because I had gone on his website and noticed, what was it called? It's working. Oh my gosh, now I can't remember the name of it, but I saw a little bit about his creativity endeavor.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So
Well, we know we can find the info on wileycash.com. I can remember that because I was like, if I try to remember the it's working, you know how I am. I'll get the words backwards or I'll say working.
and what was that Eleanor Dare book again?
I know. And I've talked about this book. I see it. I had a dream about the cover of that book, those feathers coming alive one night. I did. But I'm like, the Lost or the Last. It's the Lost book of Eleanor Dare. And I can't wait to read it.
Well, and the stone is such an important part of that story that you kind of want to go, is it the stone or is it the book or the story?
So we have some comments. Edie says, MKA and Adri are both powerful and kind women who support women. Yes, they are. And they're
Absolutely.
both about family. Jodena says both are definitely about family. Yes, that's true. That is so true. And Adriana talked about family yesterday. I fangirled a little bit. It was really cool meeting her. And when she hugged me, it felt like a hug that will last forever, you know? It was really, it was a bucket list for me. I've always, liked her. I love her show. I love how she is unapologetically herself and she's hilarious. She shares her thoughts. And Mary Kay's a little bit the same way. They're 100% authentic. And I love that for both of them. They're different, but they're both powerhouses in their own right. So kudos to Foxtail Books in Atlanta for putting them together.
Absolutely. And it was my first trip to Foxtail. So that was really cool.
Yeah. The staff there is great. They have a great staff. Tisa says both of those ladies are so funny. Yep, they are.
They are indeed.
We laughed a lot yesterday. There was a lot of laughter.
It was quite the experience, and we'll have MKA on next month for the Home Wreckers.
So yay. Mary Kay,
which I read the hardcover of, by the way, not the audiobook.
Which I have not read yet, as you guys probably could have guessed. But I will read it before our book club. And our June book club is Mary Kay for the Home Wreckers. And July is it Sally Hepworth July?
Book club.
No, it's Emily Henry.
Yes.
Right? See, yes. That's why.
July. Well, I have it up here. July 18th is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Do you want me to continue?
Yep, because I don't have the dates and my brain is.
Okay. Then August 15th, we have The Younger Wife by Sally Hepworth. And September 19th is The Lost Book of Eleanor Dare by Kimberly Brock. So we are really excited about this lineup. It's been an amazing year so far.
It has. We've had some great guests, and Wiley was he was just amazing. And honestly, I was so nervous beforehand. I don't know. I think every month when we do this, maybe I'm opening the curtain a little, giving a little peek behind the curtain. Maybe people probably don't want to know this, but I'm having my own moment, like, oh, whatever. And I think it's good that we're a little nervous because it shows how much we care and we love doing this. I think it ever got to a point where we weren't nervous at all, it would kind of mean like they were like, who cares? but I think it's good that we have a little butterflies before every month me and you, we both do. But I
Yeah.
was nervous tonight. Like it wasn't the little butterflies. I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to look like an idiot.
You had big airplanes, huh?
I didn't have butterflies. I had airplanes.
Well, I get nervous too, but I always fear that conversation won't flow because we can prepare and we know what we like to ask, but you never know what direction a conversation is going to go in. But it always seems to work out. Like the authors are such interesting people, and sometimes the conversation goes a different direction than we expect, but then we just kind of try to go with it.
Yeah. And we prepare.
Okay, that's our behind the curtain.
Yeah, we prepare so many questions. We're like, oh, we forgot to ask that question, or oh, we didn't get to ask that question, because the time flies by way too fast.
And how do you stop someone who's telling that interesting backstory about, I mean, you that's what we want to hear. So
yeah, we want to get the good stories.
Yeah.
Jeff wants to know if we're going to be in wherever the Fab Four, Rehoboth,
in New Jersey
or whatever. Unfortunately, we are not going to be able to make it. We want to go so bad. Hopefully we'll be able to go to another event in the future, or we may have an event of our own. On that note, we better get off.
Yeah, we better get off before we get into trouble.
Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight.
All right, thanks everybody so much for watching. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to Wiley tonight. Hope you did too.
Oh, I have to read this. I'm sorry, I have to read this comment.
Okay.
To Bubba. She says, she says, Brenda Gardner, I can physically see your beauty coming alive through all these live sessions.
Oh,
that is so
Bubba.
sweet.
That's so sweet.
And Tammy says, don't shortchange yourselves. You both rock. Thank you, Tammy.
Thanks. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks to everyone.
And we can always count on Bubba for some enthusiasm.
I love Bubba. She brightens my world. So all of you guys, we read your comments and we look forward to seeing what you guys have to say. And there's been days where I was down or had a tough time, or Brenda, and we'll see one comment and she'll say, did you see what Bubba said? Or did you see what Marlene said? And we'll laugh, or whoever, Jill, or, whoever. And we're just like, so we just love you guys so much. And we hit 12,000 members.
Woo! I can almost not believe it.
And 2 years ago, we didn't
know each other.
And now you're stuck with me. Okay, we're really going to end now because I'm getting silly.
Yeah, that was a fake ending a while ago. We're really ending now. Join us next month for MKA. Have a good night, y'all.
Good night. Happy reading.